Welcome to Inside Singapore's Sports Business. This show features key opinion leaders who have influenced and shaped Singapore's sports industry. This show is brought to you in collaboration with Sport Singapore and the Thorpe Board. I am your host Adele, and today we will be going to the tennis pavilion at the beautiful Hollandsey Club. Today's episode is about business development in sports. We will be focusing specifically on the AFF Suzuki Cup and its return to Singapore. Let's get going. We have with us the perfect guest for a sports business show. So it's my honor to introduce Mr. Masayasu Morita, President and CEO of Dentsu Sports Asia, as well as Mr. Malcolm Thorpe, Managing Director of Southeast Asia at SPORTFIVE. Thank you for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
Can you just maybe introduce yourselves to the audience, a bit of your background and your business, of course?
Actually, I joined Dentsu after my graduation from the university. Then I started my career on the media side, and I involved that World Athletic Championships. And I work in the media sales for the Japanese market from 1997. It was in Athens, then Sevilla, Edmonton, then finally I worked for the Paris edition. So we worked for the media sales of the World Athletic Championship for consecutive edition. Then I joined joint venture, which was formed with 5 Japanese TV station and 4 Japanese advertising agency, which the vehicle's aim was to start the kind of internet streaming service of the sports contents. So we did the first ever internet streaming service of the FIFA World Cup in 2006. Then we also done the Olympic Games internet streaming service 2008 for the Beijing Games. So after that, I back to the Dentsu headquarters and I joined the Asian department of the global sports. So at that time, I just started involved in more kind of the sponsorship area. And afterwards, I worked with SPORTFIVE, former Lagardère Sport, to manage the AFF Suzuki Cup and SMBC Singapore Open as well. Besides of that, I worked for the several ATP and WTA tournament, as well as the SEA Games in this region. So this is a quick introduction of my background.
No, thank you so much for joining us. Wealth of experience. How about you, Malcolm?
I've been in the sports business industry for nearly 30 years now. I started off in London with IMG, but I've been in Asia now for nearly 25 years. Worked with IMG in a number of roles in India originally, and then in Hong Kong, looking after the football business, football event business for IMG across the region. I then moved to Dubai and worked on a project called Dubai Sports City, building up a series of venues. And from there, came down to Singapore to join our company here in Singapore, initially to work on the Singapore Sports Hub project. And over the past few years, have worked on a variety of different events and projects for the company. And so I'm now lucky enough to lead the business here in Southeast Asia. As Masa said, we have the AFF Suzuki Cup. We work on SMBC Singapore Open. We have a range of different things. We're increasingly into esports these days, which is an exciting new area. So the world of sports just keeps getting bigger and getting more interesting.
Wow. So I guess both of our guests have seen the evolution of the sports business over the last almost 3 decades. So then what about the future? Like what projects are you guys working on that you can share with us today?
So I guess the main one that's sort of in focus right now is AFF Suzuki Cup, which is the region's biggest event. It's a football event, but it's the single biggest event for the region. It happens usually every 2 years. This year's event has been delayed because of the COVID pandemic, but for us all in Singapore, it's exciting that this year's event is going to take place in Singapore in a few weeks' time.
Indeed, we're very excited, and I think all of us are hungry for live sports to come back to the scene. Are there any other projects that you guys are working on? Are you ready for the world to go back to spectator sports?
We work together as well on the SMBC Singapore Open, so it's gonna be next January. So, but we haven't had confirmation yet. We're working on that too.
All right, good luck for that. How about you?
Yeah, well, through our work with Singapore Sports Hub, we've been their sports content partner all the way through, and obviously it's been very sad for the last year and a half that there haven't been any events at all, or very few that spectators have been able to come to. Yeah. There was the ATP event earlier this year. There's been some One Championship fighting events, but in terms of major sporting events, everybody is just dying to get back to that. And I'm sure, when things are opening up and we're able to do it, people are going to rush back to stadiums. I think there's such a pent-up demand that people are just going to be wanting to get on down, experience. There's nothing like live sports to experience in a stadium. And I think it'll be fantastic once we get that going again.
So let's get a little bit into something that we're all excited for. The AFF Suzuki Cup is finally coming back after it's been postponed for a year. And both of you are behind it. How did you have to adjust to the pandemic?
Well, this event was originally scheduled to take place at the end of 2020. And we realized very early on, obviously, when the pandemic first hit and everything was being locked down, that it was going to be very difficult to stage the Suzuki Cup in the format that it was originally intended to be, on a home and away basis across the whole region with all the countries locked down. So we spoke with the ASEAN Football Federation, whose event it is, and we said to them, and we discussed with them how we could manage in the situation. And really the only decision that was possible at that early time was to postpone the event. And we postponed the event, or AFF postponed the event, without really knowing what that would mean. And we had to stay very close with them. They were talking to all the football associations across the region. We were working with our commercial partners, with Dentsu and the other sponsors that we have for the tournament. And together we worked through to come up with a plan of what could be the best way for the tournament to be staged. And so it took about a year, but we were happy to be able to announce earlier this year that the tournament would definitely take place in December. And then we were working closely with ASEAN Football Federation, working through the selection of a venue, because it became clear, as I said, that it wasn't going to be possible to hold the event on a home and away basis, and a single venue tournament would be the only option. But there were a lot of different competing factors in terms of where the tournament would take place. And in the end, through a very detailed and thorough process, Singapore put its hand up, importantly, along with a number of other countries that wanted to host the event. And in the end, Singapore was chosen as the host, which was great.
Which we're all very excited for. With this little format change, how do you see it affecting the sport?
Obviously, we had almost 800,000 spectator at the stadium at the previous tournament. We're not going to be able to have that kind of the spectator at the stadium for this edition. But we can work on the media and digital and internet streaming. So the point that we really focus on is we get the sports back to the region, and to we really need to deliver the kind of power and the energy of the sports to the this region from the Singapore. Yeah, it's really our the biggest aim for this time.
What would you say is the significance of this AFF Suzuki Cup coming to Singapore in December? What do you think it means for the future of sports business here in Singapore?
Well, look, it's a start point. The Suzuki Cup is not going to be the full Suzuki Cup that we all would like it to have been, but it will take place, and it is a start point for sport coming back. And that's really the aim going forward. It really provides everybody as Masa said, with the opportunity to see sport happening, getting back into the stadiums is really important. And I think everybody just needs to take smaller steps, and things will grow from there. So I think we can expect during next year, as things open up, as we all get used to, to living with the problem, that we will be able to go back to some of the things that we did before, maybe in a slightly different way. But I think the opportunity to be in stadiums and witness live sport is something that will come roaring back.
What kind of viewership or attendance numbers do you foresee for this upcoming tournament? Well, I guess, earlier Masa said with the digital platforms available right now.
Well, as Masa said, about 800,000 people were able to enjoy the last edition of Suzuki Cup live in the stadiums. We're not going to be able to do that this time, but the reality is that more than 200 million people watch the tournament on television, and the overall reach of the tournament through all platforms was nearly 500 million. So most people watch this event not in the stadiums. They're an important part of the event, the people in the stadiums, in terms of bringing it to life. But most people are watching the games on television, on digital platforms. And absolutely, because there hasn't been much happening in the sport world, and particularly in this region, in the last year or so, we think that the audiences this time are going to be enormous. We think there's going to be a really strong attention to the tournament and focus on the tournament. So we're expecting really strong viewership, and we think there'll be a really good engagement from people who are just going to be happy to see, the stars they know playing again, the great competition, the rivalry that we have in between the countries. It's fantastic to get that all going again.
And so now, with the previous format being like many home and away games, and in football it's such a big thing, home away games. But now that everything's going to be in Singapore, which is great, and we have the digital platforms, do you foresee this home and away format coming back in the future, or will we just be like, actually, the digital format works?
There is nothing like being in a stadium.
I agree.
And so for sure, I think already we are talking about the next edition of the tournament after this one, and for sure to have that back on a home and away basis, because what was shown in 2018 was that format, which was new at the time, is fantastic for the fans, for the players, for everybody involved, for the commercial partners. It's been fantastic, and yes, absolutely, as soon as we can, straight back to that.
Exactly. From the sponsors' point of view, they really want to activate their rights every country. So, we for sure we're gonna get back to the home and away format hopefully from the next edition. Yeah.
How has this affected sponsorships? Do you still have like a massive number of sponsors?
Despite all the changes to the tournament, and I think this is a real example of the strength of this tournament of football in Southeast Asia, that despite the ups and downs and some of the uncertainties as we've come through the planning stages, we have not lost a single commercial partner. In fact, we've had additional commercial partners signing up even during this uncertain time. So, we have a full roster of 15 partners. Our partners, Dentsu, are very strong supporters of the tournament with the brands that they're working with, and our own sponsors as well in addition to that. So, no, we're very happy with the lineup.
So the first that we need to do, giving them the safe tournament with all the stakeholders around us. We love to activate sponsors' rights and get into the excitement together with for the reason.
Are you both able to comment on who are some of your main sponsors?
We have Suzuki for the title sponsor the tournament. We have now 6 more Japanese brands. The region is still a huge market for the Japanese brand, and the football is ideal to expand their business in the brand here in particularly here in the Southeast Asia region.
So in addition to the Japanese brands that Masa's been speaking about, we also have a number of other sponsors. So the Chinese mobile manufacturer Oppo, white goods manufacturer Medea, we have Warwick's who are providing all the footballs, we have Herbalife, Skyworth, and TMCM. So a lot of brands who recognize the value of this tournament and the way that it cuts through in Southeast Asia and really delivers value for them.
Right, and it sounds like a lot of brands are waiting to flow back into sports, so the confidence in the sports in Suzuki Cup is definitely there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, sports and sports sponsorship does something for brands that is really special. It allows them to really connect with consumers. Fans love sport, and if a brand can connect itself in the right way with the sport and with what's going on, it allows them to have really meaningful conversations with their customers and to reach people who they might not otherwise be reaching. And the power of sports sponsorship, and Masa, you'll talk about this, is really quite amazing.
What would you say is the media value, if you can share, of this event?
The overall media value that this event delivers is over 300 million. It's most of that comes through television broadcast, obviously. We have free-to-air broadcasts across the whole region, but a really big increasing value, the area that is growing the most is on the digital platforms and the social media platforms. And increasingly, and this is the same for every event, I think these days, it's really important to not just show the matches, but to show what's going on in and around the matches and creating an opportunity for people to have a one-on-one engagement with customers through social platforms. So that's the fastest growing area in terms of the value of the tournament.
I totally agree with Malcolm because, we had like a 200 million media value the previous edition. And obviously for this edition, most of the spectators will enjoy the tournament on the screen at their house, probably. That means, the body gonna jump out to the, I don't know the, specific numbers at this moment, but, we hope the body gonna keep the quality of this tournament.
It sounds like both the sponsors and the fans are hungry for this, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be a great tournament. Will be a great tournament.
So for my next question, I was going to ask both our guests today about creating business and partnerships in Singapore. But before we do that, maybe, Malcolm, can you share with us how long have you been in Singapore? What do you think of the climate?
I've been in Singapore for 8 years. It's obviously a fantastic city to live in, and it's a very easy place to get around. The facilities here are fantastic. And that rolls into the sports business because Singapore has so many advantages in terms of the facilities, the organization, the stability of the country. And so it's a really good venue, and a lot of people from outside Singapore see Singapore as a hub for the region and as the obvious place to come and bring their events and to do their business. So it's been a really good. We've seen evidence of that over the time I've been here. We've been involved with fantastic events like the WTA Finals tennis that we operated at Sports Hub for 5 years, and that was a really good example of a major world event coming to Singapore. F1 is obviously the other one that we have here on a regular basis, and the more and more of those type of events that can happen in Singapore, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
So then let's ask you first. How do you think creating partnerships in Singapore compares to the rest of Asia?
I guess the main question or the main issue around that is that Singapore, with all those advantages, is still really quite a small market in terms of the number of people. So it's for brands and for commercial business, Singapore on its own, has limitations. But when you see Singapore as the hub for the region, that's where it comes into its own, really. And so the advantages that Singapore has as a hub, with the great facilities here, and with a lot of businesses based here, makes it a good place for events to come, to build partnerships that are effective across Asia. I think that's the advantage that Singapore has. And Singapore is competing with major countries across the world that are also looking at hosting events and bringing themselves to prominence. And Singapore has to fight against that, and it's a tough market out there. But Singapore has such strong advantages, and as the base for a region with the whole of Southeast Asia, with hundreds of millions of people on the doorstep, that's really Singapore's major advantage.
And how about you, Masa? You just moved to Singapore this year.
Yeah, exactly.
How has your impression been so far?
Actually, but beforehand, we formed the Dentsu Sports Asia in 2010. Obviously, beforehand, I came here so many times on my, business trip. I really love this place in the country. And for example, we formed the Dentsu Sports International this year, and we have 10 subsidiaries over the world.
So it almost sounds like being based, whether you're in Singapore or whether you're in Tokyo, do you see any difference in the creation of partnerships, or is it pretty much a global industry right now? It doesn't quite matter.
For me, so many Japanese brands have the APAC headquarters here in Singapore, so it's really easy to work with them to discuss something directly with them. So it's a one advantage, and SPORTFIVE has the headquarters for the Asian region here in Singapore. So we have so many business partners in this city and country. Yeah, that's a probably good advantage for all of them.
I was going to say, I think that's a really good point, that the sports industry is based here as well. Dentsu are here, SPORTFIVE are here.
Yeah.
All of the major players, all of the major media businesses for the region have a presence here, and that really makes doing business here so much easier.
And so both of you have been working together for a while, right? This is not your first. The AFF Suzuki Cup is not your first event. Can you give us some hope for the future? What kind of events do you look forward to next year?
And particularly through our work at Sports Hub, we're always looking at the calendar and trying to see what new events can be brought here. We're looking now at what we can do in the summer. The summer, obviously, that summer window is obviously an important time for the opportunity to bring big football teams to Singapore. So we're looking at that. We're looking at rugby. We know there are ambitions around tennis, around table tennis that Sports Singapore are looking at. So look, there's a big world of sport out there, and Singapore is a great place to host it all.
So for me, we're gonna have the SEA Games in Hanoi next year, and of course, we're gonna have the next edition of the Suzuki Cup. Yeah, hopefully we can work on that together, Malcolm again, and we can see some potential on the esports in Singapore.
Esports, yes. Another topic all by itself. Well, thank you, both of you, for giving us so much hope. So sports fans or businesses looking at sports, you've heard it from two of our titans here in the industry. Thank you so much, Malcolm, and thank you so much, Masa, for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We hope you have enjoyed our little chat today with Masa and Malcolm. Thank you for joining us, and make sure to tune in for the next episode of ISSB.